The Donald racks up more wins and Marco Rubio goes into a tailspin. Can Trump be stopped or is he cruising his way to the nomination? But Hillary Clinton lost a big one in Michigan last night when Bernie Sanders pulled out an upset. Is it a harbinger of bad things to come for Hillary? And then Andrew Cuomo is proposing billions of dollars to expand the Long Island Railroad. It's just the latest of the governor's expensive plans to improve infrastructure across the state. The question is there any money to pay for all that stuff? Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. Even though Donald Trump won 3 of 4 states last night and was the big winner, well, at least Ted Cruz is still sounding really confident.
At this point, our campaign has beaten him not once, not twice, but 7 times.
But the night belonged to GOP frontrunner Donald Trump, winning in Michigan, Mississippi, and Hawaii, calling on other candidates to drop out and unify the party.
Let's come together, folks. We're going to win. I say let's come together.
But Ohio Governor John Kasich insists he will win in his home state Tuesday and turn the tides of his campaign.
Frankly, for the first time, people are really starting to hear my message.
Florida Senator Marco Rubio confident he'll have home state advantage too, despite trailing in the polls and coming in last in Mississippi and Michigan.
Buckle up your seatbelts. This is going to be that's right. It's got more.
And then there was the really odd part of last night's victory speech from Donald Trump. He's trying to sell himself to voters and is also apparently looking to sell some products too. His news conference last night started to look like QVC when he began touting all things Trump.
There's the water company. I mean, we sell water and we have water and it's a very successful, it's a private little water company and I supply the water for all my places. Trump steaks. Where are the steaks? Do we have steaks? We have Trump steaks. He said, the steak company, and we have Trump steaks. And by the way, if you want to take one, we'll charge you about, $50 a steak. We have Trump magazine. Let me see the magazine. The airline, by the way, I sold the airline. He said Trump Airline. Well, I sold the airline, and I actually made a great deal, complicated, and in really terrible times. The economy was horrible, and I made a phenomenal deal. You see the wine, because he mentioned Trump vodka. It's the largest winery on the East Coast. I own it 100%, no mortgage, no debt. You can all check. You just have to go check the records.
And if everything was on the level, that would be odd enough to hear from Donald Trump last night. But as things turns out, people did a lot of checking of the records, and I know this is going to shock you, but the Donald apparently did some exaggerating. As NPR and a lot of other places are reporting, Trump doesn't own a lot of the things he said he owned. The steaks said Bush Brothers on them, and the Sharper Image website says those Trump steaks were discontinued. Trump water is bottled by another company, and it's only available at Trump properties, so we're not exactly talking Poland Spring here. Trump magazine isn't really a magazine. It's really a glorified brochure from Mar-a-Lago. That's published by another company, and it comes out once a year. And Trump wine is owned by his son, Eric. It says that right on their website. But I thought I heard Donald say he owned it. Let's check the videotape.
It's the largest winery on the East Coast. I own it 100%.
And he's also running for president. All right, let's get to our panel tonight. Kostas Panagopoulos is a professor of political science and the director of the Center for Electoral Politics and Democracy at Fordham University. Welcome back. Donald Trump, political journalist and author, is with us. And Tom Doherty is here. Welcome back, Tom, Republican strategist, partner at Mercury.
Did he just call you Donald Trump?
Did I call you Donald Trump?
You just call him Donald Trump?
I've got Donald Trump.
You call him Donald Trump?
Sorry, thank you for fact-checking me. Finally, some fact-checking in this race.
Me and Mr. Trump don't exactly look alike. I mean,
you have about the same amount of money, though.
All right, so getting back to where I unfortunately got us off of.
Neither one of you owns Trump water.
right, neither one of us.
Very nice. We'll get to Marco Rubio a little bit later in the show, but is there any reason from last night's results for any hope for any of the other Republicans other than Donald Trump? Kostas?
Well, I think it's difficult. I just, I don't really see the path. But at the same time, if Rubio manages to win Florida and Kasich does well in a couple of states, at least it'll keep it tight enough to make a credible case so that, Trump isn't running away with it. But I think it's getting tougher and tougher now as Trump racks up delegates and distances himself from the other candidates on delegates.
Tom?
It's over. Last night, I was borderline. It's a wrap. He's the nominee. And don't sleep on this guy. I'm telling you, folks are going to wonder what's in this cup. You may call this guy, this clown, this snake oil salesman, you may call him president of the United States.
Okay, that's funny. Look, Trump wins the nomination as long as you have multiple candidates in the race. If Kasich is to lose Ohio, right, and Rubio, I think, loses Florida, it then becomes a two-man race. In a two-man race, it's a real problem for Donald in that polling shows that head-to-head he loses individually to the other candidates. It also poses a problem for him that I think that if he were to be the nominee, and you got to think that right now he will be the nominee, is that his problem is head-to-head in a debate against Hillary Clinton or head-to-head against a Ted Cruz. Two very good debaters. Factually, he has no facts. He has no foreign policy experience. He has no policy period at all that we have seen. It started to come out in the last debate. It's a problem for him. And to Dominic's point, this idea that he is going to win the presidency, if you look at the Wall Street Journal poll today, he loses to Hillary 51-35. He's sort of stuck at the 35 across the board. Where he does very well is against white men, right? 55-35. He's beating Hillary by 20 points. But across the board in every other category, he's getting crushed. A Republican cannot win without some input from women and some input from Hispanic voters. He gets crushed among both of them.
I'm glad you listed some of your issues with Donald Trump, because I went through Twitter last night, and Tucker Hotami, you're a regular force there, and we saw this on Twitter last night. Somebody asked you about voting for Trump, and I think it was in response to a Nate Silver tweet. And you said, I agree with him, Trump, on little, but at least he's a Republican. I would hold my nose and close my eyes. And then somebody said they're disappointed.
No.
And you responded, how do you think I feel? He makes my blood boil. You're going to vote for a guy who makes your blood boil?
No, you have the tweet wrong. That tweet was in reference to Ted Cruz. That tweet was not in reference to Donald Trump. They asked about Cruz, and I said that at least Cruz, who makes my blood boil on many levels, as you would imagine, is a Republican. Donald Trump is not a Republican. So it was clearly about Ted Cruz that I was talking about last night.
Would you vote for Donald Trump?
No. I've made it very clear I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. I can support somebody who quite frankly, is a sham. I mean, he has not articulated any serious policy discussion and has turned my party into a sideshow. He's not a Republican. Remember, Dominic and I are from New York. We grew up in New York politics. He's a Democrat his whole life. He's not a Republican activist. When he says my party, I get the chills. When the conservatives rush, he is destroying conservative principle after conservative principle. And quite frankly, you see it across the board in who's voting for him. His vote is much like Bernie Sanders' vote in a lot of ways. It's the angry person who hates government. They have no method to their madness of how we're going to fix the problems. On the trade issue, he's against free trade, et cetera, very much against a Republican. Across the board, time and time again, he doesn't hold Republican principles.
But somehow these guys are getting traction, right? Even Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side, you've got on the Republican side, Trump, who's been a Democrat his whole life, and on the Democratic side, Sanders, who's been an independent basically his whole career, right? He hasn't even been a Democrat. So I just find it very unusual that we're in the middle of this election cycle in which, partisanship seems to have gone right out the window. People are voting for other things or against things that have always driven voting behavior in recent elections, and that's just not happening. They're just abandoning all those considerations to vote for anti-establishment candidates who they think are going to get the job done because the regular so-called politicians are not doing the job.
Party's going to have to coalesce around somebody at some point, and it looks like it's either going to be a Sophie's choice between Trump or Cruz.
Yeah.
What I mean, you've listed your disdain for Cruz and for Trump. What?
Well, look, I mean, it's very interesting to see what happens, right? So the argument will be made. Let's just take it to the point that it becomes an open convention, right? Because there's no more brokers anymore. It would become an open convention. And so the argument then would become, look, we had a process. Trump, Cruz, Kasich didn't get the necessary delegates they needed. Then what happens? I think a lot of this is fantasy. I think that Trump will be the nominee. But if that fantasy were to come true, then you could reach out. You could reach out to a Paul Ryan who said he's not interested, et cetera, et cetera. You could reach out to a Mitt Romney, et cetera, et cetera. But then you've now created a real problem because you have a vast majority of people who voted for a Donald Trump who says, see, we told you this is what happened. My problem is long term is that this is for the short term, at least. For the short term, we have really damaged the Republican brand in a lot of ways.
Putting aside the possibility that if Trump gets the nomination taken away from him at the convention and might run as a third-party candidate, put that aside for now. If the convention comes up with Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, somebody who wasn't even on the ballot, who voters never even had a say about, how damaging is that for electoral chances in November?
Well, I think it's somewhat damaging because what happens to Trump's supporters, right? Are they going to fall in line behind an alternative, or are they going to rebel? And I can see, I mean, there's a really rebellious streak right now in the electorate. I think if something like that should happen, we can expect to see turbulence in this country. I mean, I think there'll be rioting. It's going to be ugly. So it's not just a matter of what Donald Trump does, but it's a matter of what his supporters do, and it's a big chunk of the electorate.
Andrew, should that happen, the National Party would be conceding that we're giving the election basically to the Democratic nominee in order to save the good of the party. It's just not going to fly. All of the high numbers in terms of Republicans turning out to vote, that goes out the window. You cannot, it's not going to be a brokered convention. It's not. Trump, unfortunately, I was hoping last night would signal something to slow him down because it's disgusting what he's doing. Even holding his campaign events at his hotels, he's making money off of that. I know a little thing about this. The national media has to pay to travel on his plane. They pay double what the regular first-class airfare is, and they have to pay to wire and so on. He's making money when he holds these events at his hotels. Donald Trump, his campaign is making money.
Nobody cares. But see,
nobody, you're right.
See,
nobody cares.
Nobody cares because if you look at the polling, one of the reasons that his supporters like him so much is they think he's successful. He has a beautiful wife. He has great-looking kids. He has smart kids. He's successful. He must know what he's doing. That's all they care about, and that's what they're looking at.
We agree.
So all of the other stuff that normally comes into politics is being thrown out the window. And I think that I disagree with on one thing, is that if you got to a point, there is certainly the case where you would have many of his supporters, right? The question is, what do they do, right? What do they do at the end of the day? You can make the argument, look, he had a chance for the nomination, it was wide open, et cetera, he didn't get enough votes, and the way we go about this is we find somebody else. I still think that if it comes down to, say, I'll pick a name, Paul Ryan versus Hillary Clinton, we then go back to picking sides all over again.
Assuming that Trump's not running on a third party.
And I don't think he does.
Last point, this whole business with the products and the whole QVC demonstration that he had last night. Have you ever seen a candidate as defensive about any criticism as Donald Trump is? Forget the fact for now that it appears that everything he was saying about those products was bunk last night, but Mitt Romney criticizes him, so he throws the product. I mean, he doesn't seem like he handles any bit of criticism.
That's why the one-on-one debates would be a real problem for him. He's been allowed in debate after debate to have sort of a circus going on. You can't do that when it becomes one-on-one.
Hasn't heard him in these debates. I know it's not one-on-one, but he just criticizes whoever's criticizing him without criticizing the policy.
But at the same time, I don't think voters are oblivious to that, right? I mean, you've started to see his support in general election matchups erode against Hillary Clinton. It's because voters are starting to get the message. They're seeing right through that, and they know what it means, and it just means that he doesn't have the temperament for many of them to be president of the United States.
All right, we'll take a break. Up next, we're going to look at the Democrats. Hillary Clinton is still in the lead, but she's hoping what happened in Michigan stays in Michigan. By losing that primary could be a harbinger of things to come.